Hello, everyone. I'm sharing these words with you at the end of a week in which there's been horrific violence against Asian Americans, and during a week in which there's been a public reckoning about a history of racist violence against people of Asian descent in our country. And of course, this racism has been a part of our country for a long time, and especially intensified during the past year with rhetoric coming from our former president and his enablers around the coronavirus. And I just want to take a moment to mention a very important source of information and advocacy, a group called StopAAPIHate.com. That's reported that over the past year, there have been roughly 3,800 racist incidents against people of Asian descent. And so whatever I say today, the most important thing I want to say is that from my perspective as the rabbi of Congregation B'nai Israel here in Northampton, I want to say to people who are of Asian descent, if you're feeling lonely or if you're feeling isolated or particularly vulnerable, I want to say from our community, we stand with you. And I know downtown Northampton, in a few hours, there's going to be a Stop Asian Hate rally. But I want to emphasize something else, which is that from my perspective in our community, our standing up as allies isn't just over kind of a gulf and we're sort of in solidarity because of our empathy. Instead, I want to emphasize a whole series of complex and very important bonds between our Jewish community and the Asian American community in general for a number of reasons. One is that included as an essential part of our Jewish community are people who are themselves Asian American. And I think that's really important to emphasize. But even among many in our community who are not themselves Asian American, who may be Ashkenazi or may have other identities, have people in their families who are Asian American, be they children, be they parents, be they cousins or step siblings or in-laws of any sort. The sense really that I'm trying to convey of our community is that our bonds across communities are not across a gulf, but they're in many cases inherent. And as we move forward, I want to try to find language to express that sense of deep connection. Now, I share these words also in the week where we read a Torah portion that I think in its own way asks us to consider these connections. Now, that might seem odd for people who anticipate what I'm going to say, because this week's Torah portion is the beginning of the book of Leviticus, which at first glance seems to have nothing to do with personal connection. It seems to have mostly to do with sacrifices, which are certainly no longer in force, a whole range of laws that are not just unrelatable, but perhaps opposed to the kinds of lives we live now. But what I see at the beginning of the book of Leviticus, and really at the very beginning of this Torah portion, are just three words that invite us to consider the depth of connection. And those words are Vayikra el Moshe. After Moses, God called to Moses. After Moses had been outside the tent, presided over its building, and then couldn't enter once it was all set up. Now, God calls Moses to come in and to be part of an intimate conversation in which Moses receives these laws and these commandments. Now, what I want to do, and really this is the interpretive part that I want to emphasize, is I want to read a poem by the poet and author Debbie Perlman, who herself wrote a book of interpretive translations of the Psalms, which are their own poetic explorations. And this was paired by the editor of the Women's Torah Commentary published by the Union of Reform Judaism to coincide with this week's Torah portion. And this is a poetic exploration of Psalm 50 by Debbie Perlman. So here are the words, and then I'll say a little bit more about the Torah portion at the end. You are the open door that beckons me in. Peeking around the door frame, I begin to enter into your glory. You move me forward, O Eternal, to step beyond self-made boundaries. Lift my foot over the threshold that I might abide with you. In the house of the Eternal, I found my questions. Waiting to be posed, they filled me with wonder. Through the doorway of the Eternal come jumbled sounds and mingled scents. Warm sunlight falls across my lap. All this all this, your creation. Sit with me, eternal teacher, encourage my seeking. As I fill my hours with your mitzvot, so shall I be filled. Then send me through your door, stretching up to honor your name, sharing out this wonder, enriching myself in the giving. So I hope this poem serves as its own door into a deep-rooted sense of generosity that exists between people, but perhaps transcends all of us while uniting us all at the same time. Shabbat Shalom.